All right, looks like we're recording. This session is going to be about scouting. It's going to be by Mike Clay, who is a mentor on Team 93, and then two students along with him, Egan Hansen, who is a senior, and Eli DeWitt, a junior. Take it away, guys.
Okay. Well, there we go. Thank you for that introduction. We really appreciate it. As you mentioned, we have a couple of fantastic students from Team 93 from the Scouting and Strategy group, Egan and Eli, as you mentioned, and actually they will be presenting and taking your questions today. So take it away, gentlemen.
All right, so we're going to start off today with going over some of the basics. So like what is scouting, why we do it, and how does it work? And then we'll bring that into the process then and going through the overview of collecting data, how we do it, and other ways to do it. And then recording and organizing that data, and then visualizing it, and then using those visualizations for some game strategy. So and then Eli will start off now with the basics.
You're muted, Eli.
There we go. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So what is scouting? It's a process for us to gather information to give us insight on other teams, how they're doing, and what the robots are capable of. It works. There's a few different ways you can go about doing it. You can use digital software to collect data, or you can use note cards or any other cards to track the data. And generally, the process includes scouters observing each match, and they record that data either on paper or on an app. Then we organize the data so we can visualize it with graphs and charts, and then we can analyze that data and strategize with it to make decisions like alliance selections. So first, we need a form that can gather the information we need. So what kind of information might be helpful? Let's say, well, obviously you would want to know where the robot can probably shoot from and what kind of points they can score. Like for instance, in this past year, some robots were able to spin the color wheel and get points that way, and some robots could not. So we would want to track that on our form so we know which robots can do that, so they can complement our robot if we want them on our alliance. And it's really important to have a dialogue with the drive team and discuss what things you think would be important to have on the app. Because, for instance, we had location scoring, whether they could score from the target zone or the trench, because that was what the drive team thought would be helpful when they were looking through the data for selecting our alliances. And we don't want to have unnecessary questions like, just an example, what color the shirt the driver is wearing, because that's not going to help anyone with knowing which robots would complement our robot. And we want to make it as easy for the scouters as we possibly can. So for the scouters observing the matches, right when the doors open, we bring 6 scouters and someone usually from strategy to, I guess, make sure everyone is doing everything properly. And we'll dedicate each of the 6 scouters to a robot on the field. And you can do it any way you want, but the way for Team 93, what we usually do is each person is dedicated to a position on the field for the starting position of the robot. So one person would take care of the robot on the red alliance furthest away from the stands, in the middle, and then the close, and then same for the blue side. And so for the process of recording data, Again, there's many methods. You can use paper cards or you can use an app. And for that app, you need a way to store the data, whether it be a JSON or an XML format or some other format. And the app needs to be efficient, effective, and user-friendly. So it's easy for the scouters to use, but at the same time, it gets the data that we need to the drive team to make their decisions. So as an example, this is our scouting app from last year. We would fill out the scouter's name in case we have any questions for them later, in case they miss something, the match number, which team number was playing, and it will autofill. So I'm just gonna fill this out. So to make it easy on the scouter, we implemented a clock in the top. So once you hit start, it'll do the 15-second countdown for the autonomous period. It will provide a map of the playing field, and they can score how many shots they make in the different positions, whether they cross the initiation line. And then once that 15 seconds runs out, there's a reminder to switch to teleop. So it's basically the same thing, except now we're seeing what the robot can do in teleop. So we know, so that'll help the drive team make their decisions. So again, scoring, we want to track whether the robot can use the control panel and get rotation control and position control, and where they can score from. And then once that time period runs out, you'll go to endgame, and then there was the hanger, and we wanted to see if they could climb or hang or park in the area. And you would get extra points for the switch being level, so we wanted to track that. And we also wanted to see if they had any kind of specific leveling system where they would move around on the switch while they were already up there, because that can be helpful to help level out the switch if our robot wasn't able to do that. And then we wanted to track if there were any technical issues with the robot. We wanted to see the alliance score. So no technical issues. Let's just say the score for our alliance was 52. No cards were given. So I'm just going to double check this. And then it will prompt me to download the XML file that stores all the data we just collected. So if I open that up, it will, this is a format, the XML format for storing the data that we collected. It'll have the scouter map and all the data we just filled out. And the way we do that is we have, we made that website, that app to collect all the data. This is all of the elements in the web page. This JavaScript here is for switching between the tabs. This is for clearing local data that we were storing. So in the beginning here, hold on. In the beginning here, it automatically stores the name just to make it easier on the scouter, and automatically increments the match number by 1, because up in the stands, it is really fast paced for the scouters. So we want to make this as easy for them as we can. So this works with setting up that data. And then we have a script for checking if the form is filled out correctly, make sure there's no contradictions or anything. Just to, if you try to submit and something is wrong, it'll give you a pop-up, and just to make sure that everything is filled out correctly. Here is just the team numbers and names for the drop-down menu in the beginning. This is everything that controls the timer. And this is what builds that XML file we were looking at earlier. So it looks at all of the different elements on the web page. So a select is like the drop-down menu, the text area is like the comments, input is like the numbers, and like here we have cases for numbers and all those, and it will do what we need it to do for those specific cases so that it will give us our proper format right here, because all of the data needs to be in the same format so it can be looked at in other software. Well, let's see here. So yeah, it'll save all of that data into the XML file, which then can be used to organize the data, which Egan will now demonstrate.
All right. So, okay. So here we are at organizing data. So now you have all of your scouters, the 6 scouters have collected all your data, and now it is stored in the tablets in XML files. Or the other options you may have, like paper data. If you don't do an app, you may have written all the data down on sheets of paper or on note cards. And so now you have all of that data and you want to organize it. So transfer it if it's digital, and then organize it in one place ideally. So we're going to go over some of the options for data transfer first. So what we use is a wired networking. And so we run a PowerShell script, and it basically just really fast. It pulls all of the data from all of the tablets through networking wires through a network switch, and then it goes into the laptop. And so that goes really fast, and it can pull it into our database. We use Access as a database generally. And so we have a button built into Access. And so you go in and you press the button and select which data you want to pull in, and it'll pull all the data over from the tablets. And so that's really quick. But I do have listed there frequent issues. So that includes things like all the wires. There's a lot of wires. And so being in the stands, staying organized with all those wires can be a little bit of a problem. And so you have to try to keep everything organized if you are using that system. As well as having issues with like wires unplugging and all that sort of things. And so I would recommend wired networking for a team that probably has a little more time to work on setting up their system, but wants something really fast. And then digital transfer. So these are methods like thumb drives, QR codes, or barcodes, and other things like that. And so this is things that aren't wired. So things like thumb drives, we always have extra thumb drives with us, always like 4 or 5 extra thumb drives in the bag just to be sure. Because if our wired networking goes out and it doesn't work, then we always have thumb drives to use. And then QR codes is something that we've seen other teams do in the past, and their app, instead of creating just an XML file like Eli showed, it would create a QR code, and then they'd go around and they'd scan it with a scanner, and it would bring all of the data into the database that way. So that's another interesting thing to look at. And then others, there are, I'm sure, many others that I didn't list there, but those are some of the main digital ones. And then if you're talking about physical data, so things like written down on sheets, note cards, that sort of thing, you could physically transcribe all of it. So take all of the individual sheets or note cards of paper and write it down onto a main like ledger or onto a main written out, like handwritten sheet. And I wouldn't recommend that personally, just because it's a little bit slow. Of course, writing all of it down, as well as you can't visualize it using digital tools. And then transferring to a digital format. So this is if you have physical data and you want it to be in a digital format. This would be like taking a laptop and reading the data and typing it into like an Excel spreadsheet or something. And that way you can visualize it, which is helpful, but it can be slow as well, like the last method, just being physical data and having to manually type in numbers. Right. And then going to options for storing data. So these, again, it really depends on whether you have physical data or whether you have the digital format of data. So if you have physical data that you transferred to a physical format, then it's really just all about organization and how are you going to sort all those sheets of paper, and whether you sort them by team number, match number, it really depends on what your preference is and what you're looking for. And then digital format. So if you have digital data, then you have things like spreadsheets and databases. And again, we use Access Database. Right now, our data is in Excel, and that's the image right below. And so you can see all the columns have the different fields that are in the XML file. So now I'm going to move on to visualizations here. So visualizations is really where you get to use that data and make it a little more displayable, a little more readable. Because if you've ever tried to like just read a database, it's very difficult, and you wouldn't get very clear evidence of like trends and that sort of thing by just reading a database, especially with the large amount of data that you'll have for scouting. If you scout all of a robotics competition, you'll have a lot of data. So first of all, why visualize data in the first place? Well, this gives you the robot performance insights that you're gaining through scouting all of the robots. So if you scout all of the robots for every competition or for every match during a competition, then you'll have all of the data and you'll be able to see all of the trends throughout the competition for any specific team or any specific match, and be able to see, you know, did they score this way or this way, and what their preferences were through the data. And that was like Eli was talking about, how finding the right fields to have. So things like how did they score or where did they score from? Those are important because you can use them at this point with visualizations. And as well as alliance selection strategy. So when you're trying to either get selected by an alliance or selecting alliance partners, then that's an important thing to have clear data to show off or to use to find teams that would help you. And then making the visualizations. So there are visualization softwares. We use something called Tableau, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Otherwise, there are also just your database software like Excel or Access. They often have like little tools inside of them to make charts and graphs. But I find using a tool like Tableau that's just for visualizations can be a little bit easier and a little bit better to show off the full extent of your data. So I'm gonna go over a couple quick tips and tricks, and then I'll show you Tableau. So the first one of the tips here is using dynamic visualizations. So this is both in the sense that your data is dynamic. So your data is updating as you update your database. So something like Tableau or the database software, you're gonna get updated visualizations as you increase the amount of data you have. And so that's important to have, as well as it's important to have dynamic visualizations in the sense that you can use filters and things and have actions in the visualizations to be able to see your data in a more dynamic way. And then aggregations, so that's things like sum and average and count and all of those things. And so choosing the right ones, making sure that you're not necessarily summing the data every time, because that can lead to things like you see one team maybe has a low sum of how much they score because they're scoring in a different way, or because maybe that time, that one match, they didn't do so well. So you want to see probably averaging out, so you can see the average of that team over all their matches. And then using filters, like I said, being able to see a smaller set of data instead of the whole thing is really important, especially for analyzing it, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But and then combined views, you can see on the bottom left there, and I'll show you this in a minute. That's in Tableau, and that's a combined view. It's called a dashboard in Tableau, and that one has something called dashboard actions built into it. And I will show you that right now. All right, so I hope you can see Tableau here. So this is what it looks like. This is what your data looks like in Tableau. So you can connect up different sheets of databases. So this is our data in Excel that's brought into Tableau, and it has a live connection to it. So you can, as you update the database, it'll update in Tableau. And then show you here. So this is what this specific chart looks like. So this one has, essentially, you can select a match number. So say I'm going to be in match 54, and we want to see, let's say tele-op lower and tele-op upper. We want to see what did the teams score, let's say on average, that are going to be in that match. What are their average scores for tele lower and upper? And this shows me right here this is the average score. So that's the 5 teams that are going to be in this match. And we would pre-fill the database with the match numbers that each team is going to be in. And so you can see that these 5 teams here, most of these focus on tele upper because they don't have any tele lower. And then you can see this one has an average that's just tele lower. So they probably focus on tele lower. So this is just something that can be helpful. And I'll show you this one real quick here too. So this is just also in Tableau, and it's allows you to select whichever team numbers you want. So you can select as many of these as you want, and then you can select what you want to compare them with. So again, I have tele lower and teleop upper selected, and it'll show you the average scores for all of those things. And this probably takes about maybe like 2 minutes to make something like this. It's really, really fast, and it updates with the data, so it can be helpful. All right, so that's that's the basics of Tableau. I mean, that's some of the things that it can do, and it can do a lot more. And you can do a lot of those things in other software as well. It's not just limited to just Tableau, but it is something I would recommend at least looking into, and it is free for students. The desktop version is free for students. So, and then the last thing, Tableau Reader. So Tableau Reader is something we use we have one extra tablet, and we can download the workbooks from Tableau and put them onto Tableau Reader on a tablet, and then we bring that down to the Drive team, and it has the same visualization and allows you to modify it and select things, or not modify it. It allows you to select things and use the dynamic features of it and view the data, but it doesn't allow you to like change it. So it's a very like lightweight version of Tableau, and it's really helpful to be able to put it onto like a tablet. And then people can view the data like down in the pits, or if you're showing it off, and it looks a bit nicer than like some images of data. All right, so now I'm gonna go into some analysis here. So this is looking at how do you look at that data, and what do you look for in the data? So first of all, again, filtering data is important. So analysis is much easier if your data is filtered down to a smaller set. So you can see in the middle here, that picture, that's a much smaller set of data than like the full data set that we have. So this is just like, this is match number for a specific team and a specific field. And it allows you, if you filter it down to something that small, then it's much easier to view than trying to view that with all the other data along with it. And then also timing for your data runner. So a data runner is what we call the person who brings the data down to the pits. And so they bring it down to either show off to other teams, but right before alliance selection, or they go down to bring it to our Drive team so that they can see the data for the matches that they're going to be playing in. And so it's really important that the data runner does not go down too early, because then they don't have all the data of the teams that are going to be in the match, but then at the same time not going so late that they don't have, they don't get there in time for the match. So, and then Drive team should always, I think Eli mentioned this, Drive team should always know how the data is formatted and what fields are going to be in the data. And so that's really important so that they can read it very quickly and then pass it back off so you can go and finish collecting more data. And then what to look for in the data. So things like trends, of course, you want to look for trends in the data, and you want to, again, use filters to be able to see those. And then comments, things like in this picture example here, you can see the third match is much lower. So I would look at that one, see, are there any comments for reasons why? Like, did their robot get stuck or something like that? And so you want to be able to see that. And that's important because it could help you decide whether you want to choose them for alliance or not, or whether they might be having technical difficulties, which you can't necessarily see in the data. And then looking for their range of abilities is also important. And do they have one focus, or do they focus on multiple things? And then any changes during the competition, like if they change a function on their robot, or if they change how they play the game. That's also an important thing to watch out for. All right. So now I'm going to go on to strategy. So this is really where you use the data that you've been collecting and did this whole process for. And now you really want to use that data. So you've analyzed it in the last step. And at this point, you kind of know what's going on with the different robots. And you want to use that data to either choose alliance partners or be selected by an alliance partner, depending on whether you're in the top 8 teams or not. And so the first thing is we always have a strategy discussion. And if you don't have one, I would recommend having one every year. Even if we're like not doing so well and we probably won't get picked by a team, we still always have a strategy discussion. And it's really important. And it's basically the people in the drive team, any like lead mentors, and then members of the strategy subgroup, or whatever group you have organizing the scouting. They all get together, and it's generally the night before the alliance, the day of the alliance selection. And so you look at the data and you look at like what the drivers have experienced with the other teams and figure out a first and last choice list. So if you're trying to select alliance partners, if you did well enough and you're in the top 8 teams and you want to like find who you would do best with to select, then you can use the data and you can write down, we make a really big list of all the teams that would have complementary abilities to our team. And so we also have to think about the other alliances when you're doing this, because it's not only your alliance playing out on the field, unless it's like a totally separated field game for some reason. It's, you want to look at both alliances and what is the other alliance going to focus on? Do they have some like really defensive robot, or is there a robot that like often runs into another robot or something? You'll want to know that to be able to choose, do we want someone who will be able to defend against them? Do we want to focus on shooting to a certain spot per se, or do we focus on letting another team do that? And so that's something to think about when choosing teams, and what sorts of abilities do you want the teams on your alliance to have. And then when making that first and last choice list, if you are in the top 8 teams or trying to get chosen, it's important to have a big enough list and write down what each team is good at, so that if there is a team that if you get selected and there's 2 teams now and you both have different lists of different teams, and you want to be able to figure out what's going to help both of the teams in like a couple minutes that you have while standing out in the field, it's really important to have a big enough list where you might have a team or 2 that might coincide with theirs, and that you can come to an agreement on who to choose. And then last of all, if you are trying to be selected, this one's really important, going out and talking to the other teams, making sure you're sort of representing your team and showing them clear evidence that your team could complement their team. And so that's really, really important. It's it helps teams like go from a place where they didn't think they could be in the finals to doing really well and maybe even winning. So that's incredibly important. Part of it is showing off your team and being able to display your data as well as other teams' data, and kind of show how you can complement them and create a cool alliance. So that's pretty much it. So we're going to go on to the last slide here, which is this conclusion and Q&A. So yeah.
There's some questions in the chat. You can either read them, or if you want, I can read them off to you.
Yeah, either works for me. Maybe you could read them off.
So Carol asks, is there a particular platform or IDE you would recommend for coding such an app or website? I believe she's referring to the scouting app you're showing in the beginning of the presentation.
What we use, we just use HTML and JavaScript, which is built into just about every computer. You just need, all you need is a text editor and a browser, and that there's plenty. If you don't know the languages, there's plenty of tutorials online. Like W3 is a good one for beginners. I think Khan Academy has some stuff too. Were you going to say something, Mike?
I was going to say, we've been using Notepad++, has been more than sufficient. It's a free download.
Just about anything works, and as long as you open that using a browser, the browser should know exactly what to do, and it will display exactly what you've coded. There are other methods, but we find using the website extremely efficient because it makes it easy to download the XML file and everything else. No problem.
All right. Next question is from Jack. He asks, do you have a group that interprets the data, or do you give it straight to the drive team?
So I can do that one. So when we, I'm assuming you're talking about probably going from the stands during competitions and giving it down to the drive team. For that, we have someone in the stands. Generally, our group for strategy is just me and Eli, or Eli and I. And so we generally have us and then someone who's watching over the scouters. And then we look through the data and we create the visualizations up there. Generally, we find the stuff that they will want to know and send it down to them. So we don't generally do a whole lot of analyzing because we don't have a lot of time for it up there. But we do like filter it so that they are getting the data that will be like most helpful for them. So yeah.
All right, good answer. Last question we have from the chat here is from Danny. He asks, how many people on the team are deployed to scouting strategy, and how large is the entire team? I guess my answer.
Okay, yeah. So our team in total this year is less. On usual years, it's fairly large, like 80, 90 people. So we have a lot of people. So scouting strategy, strategy we have Eli and I as like full, like all the time we're in strategy. But we do sort of bring on some other people to help us out. So like I mentioned earlier, having someone like watch over the other people who are scouting, that's pretty important to usually have someone doing that. And then we also have somebody, like I said, a runner bringing the data down. So that would be like 4 people. And then we have the 6 scouters up there. So.
Well, we run through scouters in like sessions, right? So we'll have 6 for like an hour and a half, and they'll swap out and then swap in, because it's a lot to ask from single students for a long period of time.
Yeah, last year we had a sign-up sheet. That way, if they had other obligations, like they need to be in the pits because they're on the engineering side of the team helping with the robot, they can sign up for their own slot. And as long as we get all of those slots filled, we're good to go. And it can be on any shift that we want. We can do shifts of an hour and a half or an hour or anything like that. And if we don't get all of them filled, then we find people who haven't signed up, and we talk to them and see if we can get them to contribute to help us out, because we need 6 scouters for all of the matches that happen. So
yeah, we're fortunate to have a pretty large team to draw from. There's kind of a related question there. I see. What changes would you suggest for a team of 25 to 30 people?
what I would consider is maybe having those 6 scouters, but having like maybe put them each in a shift of an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, and have them swap out every now and then, as long as that doesn't conflict with their other obligations.
Are you concerned about not having enough people to have 6, or trying to have more than one person, or have one person handle more than one team? I guess I'm wondering is there something behind that, Danny, I think? No? Okay. I think it'd be a little harder with 25 to 30 people, but people would probably spend more time overall scouting, which can be a little bit hard on the kids, right? That's a kind of a hard role to take. So yeah, you definitely want to give them time in between matches, give them a break.
Yeah, and I'd also say for those, only really, I mean, like ideally you'd scout as many matches as possible, but if there's any way to limit the number of matches that you have to scout, it can be helpful. So, I mean, I wouldn't say not scouting a match necessarily, but maybe focusing more attention on the matches that may apply to being helpful later on. Um, but it is difficult if you don't have enough people to have like 6 scouters for every match. Then it is really like, you'd have to have someone scouting multiple teams, or just, I don't know, it's a lot more difficult. So
I know I'm only the moderator here, but I come from a team of about 25 to 30 people. And in previous years, we had teamed up with a couple of the local teams that are a little smaller for scouting. And so we combined our resources together and shared scouting data to put a lesser impact on our students.
It's a
yeah,
great
that's
idea.
a great idea too.
If we're done with that set of questions, there's one more, I believe. It's another one from Jack. When you take the data down, do you only take down the data for the next match you are in?
So for this one, we take down, generally we bring it down, like I was saying, not too late, not too early. So like a couple matches before, and then depending on how close together our matches are. So if we have matches that are like one match and then there's another match that we're not in, and then we're right again in the next one, then we probably will need to bring it down for both of those matches, or bring it down one time and just use the data for both of those matches, I mean. Versus if we have like maybe 4 more matches, 3, 4 matches in between at least, then we would be able to bring it back up and refresh the data and bring it back down. It's just more of like, is there anything really important like happening in between? And we really don't want to miss too much. But if none of the teams that are going to be in our like second match are playing in between, then maybe it's not important to bring it back up and bring it back down.
I just want to add, last year before everything closed down, we had one competition, and what we found helpful is we had 2 tablets that were being transferred back and forth between the drive team and us. So then, while the drive team had the most updated data, we would have another tablet that we can put the newer stuff on. So then the runner can go run the new one down and bring the old one back and swap them out so they have the new data, and we can, at the same time, we can also update the data on the other tablet.
Yeah, and in general, once you're trying to get data for the teams that are going to be in the next match that you're in, so once you have the last match that has one of those teams in it, then that's when you're ready. You can pull the data together and send it down. So it can go down a little bit earlier too, if there aren't going to be any additional matches between the time you're done, right? That have data from the teams that are going to be in the next match that you're in.
So in the chat, Jack said, I know how we have done it is have 2 people in the stands to look through the data and then text the drivers what they need to know.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've done that in the past as well. Generally, we do that if there's like any situations where we can't get the data down to them fast enough, and there's anything big that happens in between. We'll just like text them whatever they really need to know. So I know if we don't have, if something big happens, or if we don't have the data ready fast enough for like alliance selection, it's been close enough in years where we've had to like text the data, or text the like pick list basically to them while they're like walking down there. So sometimes it can be pretty tight on timing, and you do have to like use texting, and that can be pretty effective if you don't have the time to bring the data down.
Typically, it is more advantageous to have all of the data so that, like with Tableau, with the reader, they can click through the different filters and get the exact data they need. So obviously that would be more advantageous, but if you're in a time crunch, just texting the drive team can be a lifesaver.
Doesn't look like there's any more questions in the chat. Obviously, we'll wait for any more to come in. We still do have 10 minutes left in the session. Presenters, if you had anything else you wanted to mention or talk about, or topics you wanted to cover a bit more in depth, you can try that.
I don't know, I mean, I feel like we've covered everything. We did go maybe a little fast in some areas, so if people wanted to go back over something, we'd be happy to do that.
For coding the app or the website, I could walk through how to get started with that if no one else has any other questions or we don't want to show anything else.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see. So this is just a directory in my computer. So I can make a new document and just call this index.html. So now that the what would you call this? The word is just slipping my mind.
File extension?
The suffix, the file extension, yes. Since the file extension is HTML, my computer automatically knows it should be opened with a browser. And since there is nothing currently in the web page, it's obviously blank. But if I open this with, I like using Atom, but you can use Notepad or any other text editor. Once you know the language, you can start writing things like, okay, start the HTML document. You can make the head and the body. And then in the head, that's usually things that aren't on the web page, like the title. And on the body, you can put content, like you can put headers, which headers are headers H1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. 1 is the largest, 6 is the smallest. And obviously this is something really simple. Then you can refresh this page and it will show everything that you have put into this code here. And then what we typically do is we separate them out into different files like JS. This is for more interactive things like clicking buttons or calculating the timer. So in order to get those into the website, we just have to put a script and then put in the source for it. So it'll be in the same directory and then the title of it. But you don't always have to have these externally. You can have them internally by just, so usually you would have script, And then you would put all of your JavaScript code in here, like let x equal 0, ... Or you can have this in a different JavaScript file in the same directory like here and give it the source. And yeah, this is obviously really simple, but if once you get more in depth to how everything works, how to display different portions of the website and how to compile all of it into the XML, you can make something like this. And if you can look at any other websites out there and you can see how interesting and interactive they are. And really the sky is the limit. You can have your own style, whatever you want.
Unless anyone else has a question, I would have a question that was, is your scouting app public, or do you have any documentation about it that people can access?
It is hosted on GitHub right now just for a repository looking back at it. If you want, I can probably just put the link in the chat if that's okay.
You asked about documentation, Dylan?
Yeah, just if anyone was interested in being able to learn more about what you guys did specifically.
Yeah, we don't have anything that's like a describable the process we went through or the code. I mean, it is all, you know, the code itself is documented. We could, if we wanted to do that, we could, as a follow up from this, you've got my email. We could set up something with a little more information about it. But right now, yeah, like Eli is saying, it is just hosted on GitHub. The actual, just the code itself with the comments on it. Yeah.
All right. This I believe this recording is gonna be going off on YouTube, so we can always put it down in the comments if you guys wanted it, or we could not. I mean, either way.
Okay.
I just wanted to add something that we, I don't know if we mentioned it too much earlier, but that is difference between field scouting and pit scouting. Because we do both field scouting and pit scouting, and the difference basically is field scouting is what we do up in the stands. It's what we were mostly talking about today. And then pit scouting is basically going down into the pits and both talking to other teams, both to show off your data as well as to collect data on the other teams. And I think pit scouting is more for like technical, like what type of drivetrain do they have, who, you know, get to know the team a little bit and kind of connect to the team. And both are really important. I just wanted to make sure that it was sort of clear the difference between those two, because they are both very important things to do.
Any more questions or anything?
Looks like the breakout room is closing. Thank you very much.
I've got that request on my screen too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for
Thank
coming.
you guys so much.
Thank
Yep.
you.